This is Monday, May the 3rd. This is American history. The Egyptians were in a bit of a tough spot in the late 70s. They had lost a considerable amount of land to Israel, and they wanted it back. President Carter saw an opportunity, and in 1979 he invited Menachem Begin from Israel and Anwar Sadat from Egypt to come to Camp David. Now, the beauty of Camp David is you can control who comes in and who goes out, and there are no phone lines unless you want to give it to them. So the Egyptians and the Israelis are going to argue and fuss and fight, but eventually they are going to come to a decision, a peace. Israel will give back land to the Egyptians, and in return the Egyptians will say that Israel has the right to exist. This becomes known as the Camp David Accords. Now, Menachem Begin is the gentleman on the right in the glasses. Jimmy Carter is in the middle. Anwar Sadat is the gentleman on the left. These three men will win the Nobel Peace Prize for the Camp David Accords. Now, the Camp David Accords will be used with other Arab countries. The Palestine Liberation Organization. These are people who lived in Israel before there was an Israel, are going to turn to more violent activities against the Israelis. Most Arab countries agree with the PLO. During the Eisenhower administration, the CIA, these are our spies, are going to orchestrate a coup in Iran. Now, the gentleman who is being held back was the Iranian leader who was elected by the people. He began to take a more communistic point of view. The Eisenhower administration preferred the Reza Pahlavi family, and they began to rule Iran. Now, Iran became our biggest supplier of oil. Iran became one of our biggest customers when it came to the sale of military hardware. It was a pretty good deal. But in Iran, there had been uprisings. The Shah had put them down ruthlessly. Those who were too important to kill had been sent into exile. The Shah, either you love him or you hate him. And many people in the Iranian country are beginning to turn against him. OPEC is going to show its anger with the U.S. over our support of the Shah by raising oil prices and creating an embargo. Gas prices are going to rise like they did in the mid-70s. This was when Nixon and the Yom Kippur War. In 1979, the Ayatollah Khomeini, the highest ranking member of the Muslim faith, will return from France, and he will come to an Iran which is ready to overthrow the Shah. The Shah is going to flee and go to Egypt. The Iranian people are going to turn to a theocracy. Now, a theocracy is where the people elect their leaders, but the leaders cannot do anything unless it is approved by the ruling Muslim Council. While in Egypt, the Shah is going to be diagnosed with cancer. Now, in those days, cancer was not very treatable. And the only place where the Shah could find a place that could treat his cancer was the U.S. President Carter agreed that the Shah could stay in the United States for treatment and convalescence and then he would have to leave. The Shah agreed. Well, as soon as the Shah set foot in the United States, the Iranian government is going to call for the arrest of the Shah and his being sent back to Iran. Carter refuses on humanitarian concerns. Iranian militants are going to become angry over this. They are going to storm the U.S. Embassy. They're going to take it over. Now, the militants will agree to release most of the women and those who are minority, black, Latino, Native Americans. But the rest of the people will be held hostage. Now, not all of the women were released. The students felt that 2 of the women were members of the CIA, and that's why they were held. Little did the students know that the ranking member of the CIA was a woman who they let go. This is a video about that time of the takeover of the U.S. Embassy. President Carter had tried to negotiate with the militants, but they would not budge. In the spring of 1980, the United States is going to try a rescue mission. The rescue mission will be a failure. One of the planes will collide with one of the helicopters, and several Americans will be killed. And the Americans get out of Iran, but they cannot retrieve their dead bodies. This here is a look at this botched raid. Well, 1980 is a presidential election year. The Democrats will go first, and they will nominate Jimmy Carter to a second term. The Republicans will now turn to Ronald Reagan. In the election, Ronald Reagan is going to defeat Jimmy Carter. Many people said that Americans were tired of Carter and high prices and high inflation and perceived weakness in the world. The red states are Mr. Reagan. The blue states are Mr. Carter. Now you'll notice in popular vote there is a pretty good slice of white. These are Republicans who voted for John Anderson. John Anderson won no states, but he won some votes. On the day that Reagan was inaugurated, the Iranian hostages agreed to release the militants, and this is going to solve one of Reagan's biggest concerns. Well, what do we know about Ronald Reagan? Well, we know that Ronald Reagan was a movie actor. Here's a still of him in the Newt Rockney story where he played George Gipp, and that's why everybody always referred to Reagan as the Gipper. Reagan will be nominated for Academy Award in The King's Men, but by the 1950s, he's tired of acting, and honestly, Hollywood's kind of tired of him. Reagan will decide to run for governor of California. He will serve 2 terms. Reagan had been a supporter of the Vietnam War. Reagan talked for conservatives. Soon after his inauguration, Ronald Reagan is going to be shot by a would-be assassin. Here is Reagan on TV talking about what it was like to be shot. Now, when Ronald Reagan was running for president, he pledged a cut in personal taxes. Reagan spoke about limiting government spending, but Reagan also wanted to increase our military budget. Now, today, we call this supply side economics. The belief is that the less you pay in taxes, the more you will go out and buy goods. These goods will spur on our economy. Reagan simply referred to his plan as Reaganomics. Reagan proposed deregulation. Reagan talked about taking the federal government out of the lives of the American people. Congress disagreed and said that the states still had to carry out the programs, and now the states had to come up with the money. This is why, if you look at Missouri, our budget's going to increase so much. Well, this sounds like a good plan, but I must tell you, not everybody agreed with it. Now, tomorrow we're going to look at those who disagreed with Reaganomics. Also tomorrow we're going to look at Star Wars. And tomorrow we're going to look at the greatest lopsided victory in the history of American politics. Now, if I had to guess, I would guess that our walkout worksheet will be sometime late this week, either Thursday or Friday.